Oh, that's whether you'll take POIs through chat or through voice.
I would prefer it through voice, thank you.
Oh, wait, quickly asking, is my panelist here with me?
Hi, I'm here.
Okay, could you please introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. My name is Malay, and good luck, everyone.
All right, once again, calling on the Prime Minister to start your speech. Here.
Right, I will start my speech. All right, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Good morning, everyone. Today, we are here to discuss whether this House, as a minority parents, will teach their children about the harsh reality of life rather than instill hope and optimism. First, I would like to offer a few definitions on the key terms of this motion. I will then offer some theoretical arguments, and our second speaker will give some more practical examples and effects. So, for minority parents, let's define that as somebody who, due to their personal circumstances, will suffer unusual harm or hardship compared to majority backgrounds. For example, this may be due to them having a different racial background or them being LGBT or disabled parents. And for the purposes of this debate, we will focus mostly on minor children because we believe that adults have the capacity to form their own worldview and are therefore not really relevant to this topic. As for the harsh realities of life, as already mentioned, it refers to some sort of forms of hardship. For example, racial persecution or biases in police that will hamper them in trying to form their own lives in the future. And we believe that parents have a duty to prepare their children for these harsh realities of life because it is part of their duties as a parent to nurture their children and ensure that they will be able to function in society when they grow up. And so let's address the counterfactual in this case. The hope and optimism, we will define it as belief in better circumstances to come or belief that the state of the world is improving. However, please note that this is a passive stance. The person would be passively hoping for the world to improve, which is unlikely to happen, as I will later elaborate on. Now, our argument hinges on the fact that realism is preferable to optimism because realism will teach you how to approach the actual situation that is in front of you and to form strategies to cope rather than passively waiting for circumstances to improve, which they likely will not. Life is ultimately unfair, especially if you have these circumstances that were mentioned like mentioned above, and therefore it is better to learn strategies to get the children through life in a manner that is least disruptive rather than to hope that circumstances will eventually change in the future. So why is this? Well, the importance of putting your child in an active position is that well, hope and optimism, it is a position of privilege. It is easier to be hopeful and optimistic if, for example, you come from a stable family, you have a decent income, you don't have to worry about going hungry or not paying the bills or being homeless. It is much easier to be optimistic about the world when you don't have these factors impacting you, where you're not worrying about putting food on the table at all. And minority parents are often due to the effects of systematic racism are more susceptible to these awful circumstances. As such, it is ultimately difficult and not worth the effort of trying to develop a hopeful and optimistic mindset at all. And why is this? Because
UI.
Yes, go ahead.
Are you asserting that it's a waste of time for parents to instill hope and optimism for their children's own future?
Yes, because it is better to instill realism rather than optimism. I was about to elaborate. So, because when you're passively hoping for the world to get better, then that mechanism only works if the world gets better. And this likelihood is not exactly high right now. Hate crimes are on the rise. There are people out there who question if you have the right to live. No, thank you. There are people out there questioning if you have the right to exist in the same country as them, if you have the right to live, if you're even a human being just like them. In this against these circumstances, it is more important to be realistic and to address these circumstances of the society against you and to have that sort of awareness so that the child can learn how to cope in the future. And secondly, it can be argued that, well, having optimism will increase the child's self-esteem in the critical early stages of life. But, well, this argument does not really hold water because it is especially important as a parent to address these issues as early as possible, because that is the duty of a parent. The duty of a parent is to take care of their kid and ensure that they can function as a human being in society later on. Well, there is no dispute that parents are responsible for nurturing their kids, providing food, providing shelter. So why should they not also provide a correct worldview for understanding the complicated and fragmented world around us? And just by telling your child that, just because people look down for you for looking a certain way or, having a certain background, that does not mean that you cannot succeed. This is actually more empowering for a child from a minority background to acknowledge that they are being oppressed and to succeed in spite of that. Because it is more likely for them to be able to achieve. Sorry?
Sorry, point of information?
Oh, yes, go ahead.
It seems to me that your argument is missing a logic link. Why does awareness of an issue make you more likely to succeed?
Sorry, let me clarify. When you are aware of an issue, you are able to develop tactics in order to address it. And when you develop these tactics, you will be more able to succeed in the future. I hope this clarifies it. However, as I was saying earlier, it is more empowering to acknowledge that that there are people who look down upon you, that these circumstances for you might be different from these circumstances of someone from a majority background, and that you will have some challenges that other people might not even have to worry about. However, it is more important for you to be aware of this, for example, in this case of systematic racism, you need to be aware that police are not going to treat you as kindly as they would for a person of a different race. So therefore, you might have to teach the child to cooperate for the police to the greatest extent that you can, and just hope that nothing happens, rather than passively hoping that one day racism will just go away on its own and that police will treat you equally. That is not going to happen. It is more important to tackle the issue in front of you so that you can cope, so that you can learn how this society functions. And therefore, we believe that realism and coping with how life is inherently unfair is more important than blind optimism and faith in the world being better. Thank you.
I thank the Prime Minister for that very fine speech. Now calling on the Leader of Opposition to start the op case. Hear.
All right, I will start in 3, 2, 1. All right. What opening government wants you to believe is a world, it's essentially a fairy tale world. They're preaching that once you tell a child the harsh realities, it will eventually figure out how to deal with these harsh realities. Their definition, in fact, is also wrong in this regard. Let me offer some rebuttals. So let's start with their definition. Their definition of minorities, of ethnic minorities, is essentially people who are at an economic disadvantage that belong to LGBTQs, LGBTQ, disabled, and let's say racial minorities. But the fact is that they're essentially excluding all of those people who come from more privileged backgrounds. They're essentially saying that that those who come from regular, normal, like middle-income households don't qualify as minority parents, even though they face the same extent of racial discrimination, the same extent of general problems in society, such as they mentioned, judicial bias, as every other minority. Another thing that that opening government has brought up is it's essentially their entire argument is that by instilling hope and optimism, we're teaching a child to be passive. Passive belief in a better world, passive belief that life gets better. But they lack a logic link in that we're teaching them the harsh realities would make them active. What a 3-year-old and a 12-year-old have in common is that neither is capable of putting food on the table by themselves. You can't And essentially, what wouldn't empowering a child by telling them, oh, you're able to achieve whatever you want because you have strength, regardless of whether or not you're different from the other people, regardless of whether or not you're of what differences other people see in you, you are able to do what you seek to do. Isn't that better than telling a child the world is harsh, you are eventually going to fail because everything is against you? Now, onto my main argument.
POI.
Yeah, sure.
I think you have misconstrued our argument. We are saying that it is better to be aware of the circumstances around you so that you can succeed. We are not saying that the child is doomed to fail. Can you please address our argument properly?
I mean, essentially, your argument essentially says that there are no tools given to these minority children to aid, to empower themselves, to empower them. And also, even if you're saying that they should be more aware of the issue in order to succeed, there are a lot of issues in this world that we are aware of that we cannot address because we are incapable of addressing, because we at this moment in time are incapable of addressing them, especially in the cases of those who are, in a more vulnerable state such as minorities, by telling by essentially making a minority child someone who is still in the developmental stages of life, by telling them that they are incapable of achieving what they want to simply because they are different, you're essentially breeding you're breeding a defeatist culture within their minds that's going to follow them for the rest of their lives. I will elaborate on this in my arguments, which I was getting to. So the minority parents are generally first or second generation immigrants. That's my first point. What they experience, the harsh realities that they experience, do not necessarily represent what our current generation is facing. The extent of discrimination that they face, such as in the 1950s and 60s, there was rampant racial segregation in the USA of black people compared to white people, that does not exist anymore. The extent of the harsh realities they faced are not necessarily the same as what the youth of today are facing. And also, up until recently, the U.S. also had affirmative action, which was there to essentially, which did not exist until the early 2000s, in order to empower these minority students, which allowed for a lot more students to achieve, to do better than their local counterparts, to become what they were meant to be. Now, let's compare instilling hope and optimism compared to instilling a belief of harsh realities. Let's talk about the harsh realities. You're essentially getting hit by a truck when you're told that you can't achieve something because you're different. Take a child who is of the LGBTQ community, for example. If they are told that they're going to be denied access to hormonal treatments, to surgery, simply because their country doesn't offer them, because there is governmental bias, don't you think that would, instead of telling the child to find, instead of instilling hope that there are other options in other countries, don't you think that it would essentially just cause a child to have the belief that okay, it's done for me, I can't do anything about this? Because what this does is it breeds a defeatist culture, as I mentioned. There's a vicious cycle of parents telling their children that the world is bad, that it is hard, which would discourage the children from achieving their best. For example, let's take Buster Douglas, for example. So Buster Douglas, he went up against Mike Tyson a few decades ago in the boxing ring. And Buster Douglas's mother brought him up to believe in himself. She was so optimistic regarding him and his abilities that she even told the entire world that he would knock down Mike Tyson and become the world heavyweight champion. The general belief, the public belief, was that no one ever knocked down Mike Tyson. And honestly, if this belief was drilled into him from a young age, he would probably go on to subconsciously believe that he was incapable of knocking down Mike Tyson. But you know what happened when he was raised with hope and optimism? He knocked down Mike Tyson. Another thing we can take into account is essentially the job market and competition. The Asian minority is often brought up to pursue top educational opportunities, perpetuated by exams such as Gaokao and CSAT, the CSAT in Korea. And the fact is that by essentially empowering the harsh criteria of these examinations, by telling them you must go to these tutorial centers until 12 a.m., until 1 a.m. You must study as hard as you can. You must give up your health in order to build a better future for ourselves. By telling them that these harsh realities exist, there is a reason that that even in Hong Kong, even in Asia, there's such a large extent of student suicides. In a lot of countries, in China, India, Hong Kong, in Hong Kong, which is a special administrative region, of course, and in Korea even. This is further perpetuated by the difficulties of the exams such as the Gaokao and the CSAT. But my deputy leader of opposition will continue to elaborate on this. Now, if if you want to have a world where minority students are achieving everything they can, where minority children are achieving everything they can, where minority parents and their children have better familial relationships, there is a world with no perpetuation of racial stereotypes of bigotry, then please oppose the motion. We are proud to oppose. Thank you.
I thank the Leader of Opposition for that very fine speech. Now calling on the Deputy Prime Minister to extend the opening government case. Hear, hear.
Yes.
I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. The opposition has put up the narrative that the government has overlooked the fact that we have not touched upon the rich parts of society. We want to put into the motion that the rich part has been overlooked because they do not face a harsh reality of life. As such, they are not a part of the motion. The opposition also talked about the fact that we have talked that children do not have the power to empower themselves with physical action by just knowing about the harsh reality of life. It's not just the physical action of being aware of these harsh realities, but also the mental framework. As a black child, if you are aware that in school children won't play with you because of the color of your skin, then not only will you not possibly have the option of changing racism just in that moment, but you can have the idea in your mind that since children won't play with you, you won't become upset or sad when they don't play with you. As such, your self-belief won't be impacted. Also, opposition talks about affirmative action. This is a government's action, and as such, it takes the burden away from the parents, and it moves away from the motion rather than adding to it. So the opposition were attempting to squirrel. As a parent, each parent has the duty to teach the children about the harsh reality of life. As a minority, these relevant things that we teach our children happens to
Point of
be the
information.
fact that. Go on.
As a parent, when you give birth to your child, is your primary goal to make them happy or to make them economically and financially successful?
It's as a parent, it's your duty to make your child independent, and to make your child independent, you have to make them aware of the realities of life. And as I said, as a minority, those relevant factors of life that you're telling your child is the fact that life is harsh, unfortunately. So just to take it into example, as a rich parent, the realities of life that you may tell your child is about how to run the family business. As a poor parent who has problems with their credits, how the harsh realities of life that you have to tell your child is how to spend wisely and how to save and how not to live a luxurious life. Also, self-belief isn't related to hope and optimism. It is possible. Yes.
So your point is quite contradictory to what the Prime Minister has said, because essentially, as a parent who is supposed to nurture their child, doesn't it defeat the purpose? Because if they're living because as your Prime Minister said, if they're living in a situation in which they're underprivileged, if they're working their parents are living from paycheck to paycheck, won't these realities already be apparent to them instead of having them being taught?
No, as you said, as a child, you're initially naive, which is when, from the moment of being initially naive, when your parents do teach you more about the world, i.e., that you live a hard life, which you're not able to see as a child. As you grow up, you can affect yourself through physical decisions and your mental framework of the world in order to have self-belief. Also, this lack of awareness of a child about the realities of the world leads to an unrealistic expectation of the world. Currently, the status quo is that many children are unable to live with the burdens and harsh responsibilities of life. As such, this comes from parents not teaching their children, which is why when they face these financial problems, they turn towards drugs. So in our motion, we would have parents teach these children about what they may face when they grow up, so that when they do grow up, they don't turn to these drugs and other devices in order to overcome the feeling of being overwhelmed. Lastly, our argument is also that children The last argument is also that not letting your child know about the harsh realities of life may lead to low self-esteem. If a child isn't aware of what they may face in terms of the problems in life, when they do face those said problems, they won't know how to overcome it, and that may lead to low self-esteem. For example, that black child, if they're not aware that when they do go into school that other children are going to treat them badly, when they do get treated badly, they won't know how to mentally overcome the situation, which will lead to bad psychological problems. For example, a child can develop anxiety disorder or feelings of depression or low self-worth because they're not getting that self-worth from the way they interact. So the way that we characterize this motion, if a parent does have the opportunity to tell the child that when they do get into school, the world may interact with them in this certain way, then when such things do happen, they won't have a low self-esteem because they would have already had the internal opportunity to overcome the situation. Lastly, we assume that kids want to be naive, that they don't want to know the harsh realities of life. Whereas when they do grow up, they may look towards their parents in a negative manner because they have not made them aware of how life would be like when they do actually grow up. That is all we have. Thank you. So,
All right, I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for that very fine speech. Now calling on the Deputy Leader of Opposition to close the opening exchange. Here.
Morning, guys. My name is Kyle. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the Deputy Leader of Opposition. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. The opening government appears to have this belief that children will be unaware of racism before they enter society, and that only by warning them can we really truly equip them with the tools they need to survive in today's rigorous society. However, they seem to have neglected the linkage between making them aware of the issues around them and actually giving them the tools to deal with, which they have not addressed at all in their opening 2 speeches. They also believe that by not warning them and instead giving them hope and optimism, we are setting unrealistic expectations for them so that they are unaware of the racism or other social issues surrounding them, and that they will only be hoping in a more passive stance that change will be brought about in this world without trying to actively change it. However, we believe that by offering hope and optimism as an alternative to simply beating into them a defeatist attitude, we can provide them with the tools they need to try and drive change in society in a more proactive manner and help breed a better culture in general and provide a better life for themselves. They believe that only by telling them about these harsh realities, the self-belief of the child will not be impacted. We believe that by doing this, you are only giving them a coping mechanism where they know the racism is present right now, and they will not be sad when they eventually face it in the future, but they fail to realize that they are not breeding a positive mindset that allows them to search for better opportunities in the future, and simply telling them that we lose, it's normal. And we believe that this breeds a defeatist attitude and in general is not beneficial to the child in the long run, whereas hope and optimism gives them a chance to at least drive this change. Opening opposition believes that it is better to instill realism in opening government believes that it's better to instill realism rather than hope in the child, but we believe that simply by teaching the child to cope is not necessarily beneficial to them in the long run, and only by adopting our line, which is giving them hope and optimism, can the child benefit in the future in general. Now moving on to my arguments. Opening opposition believes that defeating the child mentally from birth serves no purpose to the child's future, and in fact only shows them that the world is bad without actually trying to show them that there is a possibility of good in the world. I'm going to tackle this from 2 different perspectives: the parental perspective and the child's perspective. We believe that by giving them hope and optimism, we can build better familial relations, because not only are we not letting this negativity impact the kid, if a parent constantly beats into a kid that the world is bad and that everybody is out there to get you, there is a large chance that you teach the kid to back off from everybody, and this is detrimental to the child's future in general. We believe that having happy kids who are more willing to see others' perspectives in the world and brings optimism and a more proactive attitude towards trying to change these issues, and that this will eventually impact the parents in general, because as my leader of opposition has already said, As my leader of opposition has already said, we believe that breeding this defeatist attitude brings no good in general, and that the children will not be, and that just breeds a vicious cycle that of parents telling children that the world is bad, and this will discourage children from trying to achieve their best and hamper their opportunities even further in the future. From the child's perspective, we believe that not only does this give them a happier childhood, it also helps breed a more positive view on the world, which allows them to see the world with a more open mind and not solely shy from every single interaction just because they're brought up to believe that this interaction is not going to go well for them. While children might be incapable of addressing the issue right now, opening government's stance seems to eliminate the possibility of them growing up with a more positive attitude and trying to proactively address this issue when they are actually in a position of power. So we believe that our stance opens up this possibility, and theirs eliminates it. Therefore, our case has a better chance over them. My second argument is based on the perpetuation that there are harsh realities out there deprives not only that by solely perpetuating the possibility of harsh realities waiting for the kid out there, the kid is deprived of the tools to deal with these harsh realities. And this logic is not expounded on by opening government, and they have not explained clearly how this can lead to better opportunities in the future. A good example of this is Buster Douglas, who has already been raised by my leader of opposition as how a positive attitude can lead them to achieve greater things. I also like to bring up the example of Heinz Ward, who is half Black and half South Korean. Heinz Ward grew up ostracized by the Black community because his mother was South Korean, and this in turn led to him running into some roadblocks at different stages in his life. However, Ward's parents didn't allow this to completely defeat his spirit, and instead encouraged him to be more proactive and try and create new relationships and find new opportunities for himself. And he eventually became a great leader in the NFL with the Pittsburgh Steelers as a running back, and is also really proactive when it comes to promoting his South Korean descent. And we believe that by giving kids possibility like Heinz Ward's parents did, this allows the kid to drive change like Heinz Ward was when he was a famous NFL player and could promote to other people about his South Korean descent and how both his Black and South Korean roots have helped him grow as a person. We believe that by breeding positivity in him, and this allowed him to eventually breed more positivity in the surrounding communities, in the Black and South Korean communities, because he was brought up this way to not simply accept the harsh realities of being ostracized by Black kids, but embracing his South Korean descent and eventually leading to a better outcome for both Black and South Korean communities. Ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you right now that no 5-year-old is going to shoot a YouTube video and instantly turn racism into sunshine and rainbows instantly. But if that child grows up in a nurturing environment where hope and positivity are everywhere and goes on to become a top politician who brings in policy and reform to help his minorities, that is because his parents brought him up to believe that there is good in the world and gave him hope to deal with the challenges that came at him in the future. If you believe what opening government says, do you see that happening if the kid is defeated at every opportunity by his parents and has harsh realities beaten into him at every juncture in life? We believe on opening opposition that we should be the change we want to see in the world, and that if we don't teach our children that there is hope in the future, that they are the hope of the future, that we are simply walking into a dystopia that we do not want to live in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, do you want to live in that world? Or do you want to be positive and teach our kids to be positive so that they can drive change? We are proud to oppose. Thank you.
I thank the Deputy Leader of Opposition for that very fine speech. Now calling on the Member of Government to start the closing exchange. Hear, hear.
Good morning to everyone here. As the member of the government, I will define the motion again. This House, as a minority parent, would teach our children on the harsh realities of life rather than instilling hope and optimism. What do we mean by minority? Minority parents includes parents from different racial background, religious background, or different economic background, and also minority youth parents which have suffered prejudice, or in a sense that they are in a lower hierarchy of the society in life. But then what do we mean by the harsh realities of life? Harsh realities of life are the truths in a society which personal hardship that anyone that have the possibility of going through, which in the sense that every one of us has gone through some difficulties because life is not a bed of roses. Ladies and gentlemen, we do agree to the government that as the minority, at some circumstances, we are barred from a good treatment, such as we might experience prejudice, systemic discrimination, or we might not have the opportunities or resources to has the higher possibility to succeed as the majority. But we want to provide a better solution, which we instill our balancing awareness and optimism as a parent towards our child. Let me remind the panel again, what are we here today? What we want today is that we teach our children on the harsh realities of life for the development of our own child and to prepare for the personal hardship they are going through in their life. And hence, we, as a minority, we recognize that, it might be difficult for us to succeed like the majority, given that we have limited resources, opportunities, or might face discrimination. But we do not want to paint the majority as the bad person, in the sense that because some of the majority might not want it as well. They even treat us with a nice attitude. In the Malaysia context, look how the Malays treat the Chinese and Indians. When you face personal hardship itself, it was always them to stop by and help and lend you a hand. So I don't see that why do we need to paint the majority as the bad guy, which they are the reason of our hardships. And hence, I propose that we as the parents, it is our duty to provide guidance to them about and expose them to the harsh reality of life, for them to prepare for their future, for them to prepare themselves towards their journey. You can't possibly let your children live in a bubble and sugarcoat everything, or in a sense that, you're going to tell the children every day, the majority are the bad guys, we're not going to succeed, we're going to be mistreated, in a sense. But what we can do is to provide them guidance that, we recognize there are certain tough things that we are going through, but we can do so much better rather than having a vengeance mindset that, I'm definitely gonna be mistreated. We are building their world in the contrary, that we recognize that life is not a bed of roses and there are a mix of good and bad in the world. We do not want to hold grudge towards the majority, even though that the majority has something tragic has happened between the majority and minority in the past. It should stay in the past, but do not let it remain the personal child. We recognize that life is unfair, but what as a parent should do is to properly tell them, there definitely are things that you are going to be through, which are probably challenging or difficult for you to go through. But we shouldn't tell their parents that. But we shouldn't also instill blind positivity in the sense that we should not tell our children the harsh reality of life because we want them to properly be happy and go lucky against all of the life and not to be pressurized to succeed. No, that is not what we want. Rather by we propose a solution which we balance awareness and positivity, which we both prepare our life towards the hardships that they're going to face, but we also emphasize on our personality, positivity, emotional development in the child, in the sense that we do not want our child to be pressurized every day that, we're definitely going to face hardship. That's not what we want. We want them to have a proper development of the personality in the sense that they are aware and they are not sugar-coated, but they also recognize that there are going to be some hardship that they are going through. And hence, this will lead them to have a better resilient and adaptable personality, which they can better adapt to the needs of the society. I would like to emphasize that it is our duty as a parents to prepare our child for hardship. Hence means telling the harsh realities to go towards our child, but we also want our child to have a positive personality, and in a sense that they will be resilient in terms of the hardship they're going through, but not develop a vengeance-based personality. And whenever they say that, oh, that's a hardship, we are the minorities, we're definitely going to get mistreated. That's not what we want. What we want is our child to succeed and also have a healthy development of a personality. We should take a win as we provide a better solution. We recognize that children are naive and children of married parents are naive in general. And since children are naive, isn't that the duty of the parents to properly guide them by telling them history or personal experience of history, which will better expose them to the harsh reality, but also telling them the good aspects of the life, such as the majority are nice in the sense that they do not want to discriminate us. We should take a win as we provide a better solution by balancing awareness and positivism in our child, which can provide a better way, which is a better way for our children to succeed and is able to develop a resilient and emotionally prepared children in the future. Thank you.
I thank the member of government for that very fine speech. Now calling on the member of opposition, here.
Hi, am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Okay. Side government would choose to tell their kid that instead of Santa bringing them gifts every year, that they bring them hardship and pain. That's the entire problem of side government, when this debate should be about the relationship between a minority parent and a minority child. Not whether they can change the society or not, but whether that their child grows up to be happy. Let's first point out that side closing government's case is completely derivative from side opening governments. They've basically repeated the logic and refused to give any more real-world analysis on how this would actually look like. So I'll just start by dealing with what there's already been a consensus in this debate, right? It's really quite clear that both sides make it clear that the minority child has a lot of systematic barriers that make it unlikely for them to succeed. But let's extend this analysis further, which side opening opposition didn't give, by pointing out there are things like political systems where the minority gets a minority vote, or there'll be things like gerrymandering, which are working completely against them, when the very governor that is representative of their state won't even represent the voters to their interests. They also have problems with education and access because of their location. They won't be able to go to the prestigious universities that will actually give them a chance to break out of their poverty cycle, right? There'll be stereotypes against them socially, where they'll be discriminated against in the workplace, making it very difficult for them to be promoted. So a lot of these things will make these minority children shunned against in the society. But what is most important in this debate is that the mental health of the child is fundamentally what a parent should choose to inculcate in a child, regardless of whether they are financially successful. In both sides, even if you financially succeed or not, you actually lead to more harm on side government side, because the child would have to be faced with a huge amounts of disappointment. And this will actually lead to a worse mental outlook for the child on his life, right? Let's bring some mechanism into this. In order for a child to be to gain optimism and to be more have a better outlook on their life, there will be a lot of prerequisites to this, right? What this means is that the parents would bring the child into more, for example, social gathering events where they are interacting with others of their same community, where instead of looking at differences that bring them apart, they look at the things that bring them together, creating like a community for the child. There will be things, instead of celebrating the hardships in their life, they'll be celebrating things that make their culture unique. For example, foods and eating their food with their family, or celebrating holidays with your family, right? These are all concrete actions that a parent can do to influence their child, especially when they're young and malleable. Instead, on their side, on government side, so I'll take you in a moment, they are more likely to distill the entire logic of how this systemic discrimination works against them and lose a lot of nuance that makes their explanations emotionally charged. Yes, what's your POI?
Celebrating your culture and heritage is not exclusive to having hope and optimism. Those two things are not related. You can be aware of the situation around you and still celebrate what makes your culture unique. How would you respond to that?
When you are explaining why the kid was rejected for this particular school when he's just 11 years old, how would you really throw him into a social science class and bring him a fact textbook explaining to him the 200 years of history that affects him? No, you're far more likely to tell the kid that a white person just hates you, that this Chinese person just hates you, and instead make him more emotionally charged and even linked to things like generational trauma. For example, a parent will tell their kid that this group of people are bad because they killed your grandpa in this war some 100 years ago. And this is especially preying on the anger and the revenge and the feelings of injustice on the parents instead of telling the child that there is a chance for the kid to succeed, right? And it is required, and it is in this case, it shifts the focus away from a lot of the things that makes the child happy onto the things that makes the child disappointed, right? And it actually destroys the hope within them, and it doesn't bring them to think about the inspiring stories and give them the optimism that they need, right? A parent, instead of telling about success stories of their minority group, they rather focus on the ways that the group has been oppressed, which doesn't actually help the child, especially when it's been distilled to such simple terms about this group hating this group without any nuance at all. And it actually gives a child a flawed understanding of how things actually work and gives them a more negative outlook on life. I don't see why their side thinks that they can still focus on the things that are good in your life and have gratitude to appreciate the things that you already have when their side chooses to completely focus on bloodshed and war. So on our side, the growing child is more willing to accept and deal with situations that are out of their control because of the fact that they realize that they have an optimistic outlook, right? This makes a child more resilient to like a lot of hardship and failure, and also leads to less things of imposter syndrome because they have more gratitude to the things that they have, right? And actually leads to a better upbringing of their children, preventing a lot of this generational trauma, right? A lot of this analysis has been missing from side opening opposition. Secondly, this will actually lead to more activism since people are more likely to give help to people that are already willing to help themselves. Let's see what happens when you already have a pessimistic attitude, right? Those NGOs and people who are willing to actually, or even the people in the community around you who are already willing to give help, won't see any utilitarian benefit to helping you, right? Because the fact that they are helping you comes from the fact that they're sympathetic and that they're altruistic, right? For example, if you see someone complaining all the time about how their grades aren't improving, and they completely are terrible at their subject, and they're just willing to give up, you won't be willing to put in any sort of effort to tutor them to help them improve, right? But on our side, if a kid was trying his best to do all sorts of practices that he can, a teacher is of course more likely to help the kid. So on our side, if we are looking to gain as much support as possible for the kid, it is more important for the child to be optimistic and to actually look to the future, to trigger those sort of empathetic circuits where the people around them are actually willing to see the child as a sort of person. So for example, we can see this in a lot of GoFundMes, where if there's a clear story and there is some clear objective to work towards that the child is optimistic about, it's more likely to bring in donations. It's more likely to gain support from on social media. We also see things like what Malala has done, where she has created a very compelling story that even in such a desperate and harsh situation like in the Middle East, people are still willing to make change, and it's still possible to make change. These tugs on the heartstrings of the people, and making them more willing to change sort of these hard-set institutions in Afghanistan. And it makes people more optimistic, and it inspires the hearts of the other people. So fundamentally, a child is a small part of society and can't change everything that is setting them apart. But what they can change is the mentality that they have, and actually makes them more aspiring towards a better future. This is what parenting should be about, not about getting practical financial gains. Side with us.
I thank the member of opposition for that very fine speech. Now calling on the government whip to close the government case. Hear, hear.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
All right, I would prefer verbal POI, if that's all right. Give me one moment, please. All right, whip speech starts in 3, 2, 1. Panels, ladies and gentlemen, members of the floor, may I ask what is the duty of a parent to a child? To prepare the child for any hardships and at the same time balancing their mental well-being, isn't it? I would say that it's a very safe thing to say that both opening government as well as the whole of opposition have failed as parents, because one goes on the extreme that says, hey, we're just gonna tell you that back in my days we were tortured, we were all this and that, so you're gonna endure the same thing. And the other is all sunshine and rainbows, gonna shelter their child as if they do not want their children to prosper in society. Panels, we have seen how are the outcomes of children that are sheltered against children who are given the harsh reality of life, and also children who are given both the optimism, the hope, as well as the reality. So let me sort of enforce my member of government speech first. So she mentioned something about a balance of both sides of the world. So why is our world better? One, we provide both sides the things that they need. One, we teach them as to how exactly is reality in their life is. It's unfair. We're gonna get discriminated no matter what. But at the same time, hey, get your hopes up. That doesn't mean that everyone out there is out to get you.
Point of information.
No, rejected. I haven't finished yet. Second, what both sides, opening government as well as the whole of opposition, have failed to see is that each side of their proposal poses a mental and emotional turmoil upon the child. So yeah, on opening government, as much as I would love to agree that we both would say that we should give them the harsh reality of life, what we as closing disagree about is that the fact that they want to give it entirely. We are the balance of both. Opposition will probably argue, hey, you can't just balance both. You have to choose one. The thing is, we are not extremists like you. I myself am a minority, and even I find it absurd. And second, harsh reality, by what my member of government mentioned, is that we provide them as parents a heart-to-heart talk about, hey, just to let you know, we went through this, we went through that. Probably you'll go through the same. However, let's not get your hopes down. You see, back then we may be treated badly, but that doesn't mean that right now you will be, since time evolved and everyone is liberal in a way. Hence, we have our rights now. So things are gonna change for the better, and you will be part of the change. So why not you do better? You be better than us, better than back then. Take a lesson from the past and not let the same mistake repeat itself. Because the moment we go by opening government as well as the whole of opposition, history is gonna repeat itself.
Point of information.
Go on.
So by asserting that times are better and times change, and are you asserting that that essentially there is no more discrimination in the world, and that all discrimination can be fixed within the lifetime of the children currently?
Okay, enough. I know your question. Opposition has really misunderstood my statement. Let me reiterate it once again. What we said is that discrimination won't go away in the blink of an eye. We are just driving our children to be the change towards racism, to be a change to combat racism bit by bit. I'm not saying that racism will be gone entirely. By the end of the day, there will still be racism. But however, what we intend to do, one, is to build resilience in the child to face any hardship that is to come. Make them emotionally prepared by giving them the harsh reality lesson. And second, to make them not lose hope that there are people out there that still care about them. Opening government, what we turn to debate from them is that we don't intend to paint them in a very bad picture, whereas opening government is painting the majority race in a very bad picture, hence painting them in a bad light in their own child's eye. And what's the child gonna be? Depressed and say, oh, hell no, you people tortured my parents, I don't want that. And whereas what we propose And why we should take the win is because one, we provide a better alternative in which it's mutually exclusive. One, we give them the harsh reality of life by saying it's unfair, you're gonna get discriminated anyways. And at the second, we instill hope in them that says, hey, as much as it sounded bad earlier, well, do keep your hopes up, because you just have to do better, pursue better education, and get a better life of your own. Hence, go on and be part of the change that we, the older generation, would love to see. Second, let me put out a scale to you. Imagine a scenario where, one, you are giving your children way too much optimism and way too much hope, say, hey, everything is good, sunshine and rainbows, and keep them in a bubble. And then one,
Point of information.
Rejected. One, you have given them the harsh reality lesson on an entire scale. And third, you have what we propose, a little bit of both. Which child will develop better? Of course, it's from closing government, because why? We provide both the hope as well as what they will probably go through in life. And I don't know what's up with OG, but they keep saying that we should give them a harsh reality. That's basically, yes, you do want them to strive better. Yes, we do want them to, know what they're gonna face. But I suppose all of us here can agree on one thing, is that as parents, we want the best for our children. And I will have to say this, but OG and the whole of opposition failed to see that. And hence, this is why I keep saying they failed as parents, because it's a duty of a parent, be it of the majority race, minority race, it is a duty of a parent to prepare the child for hardships in life. And at the second point of this duty is to ensure the child's mental well-being is good, is well protected. That doesn't mean that you have to shelter them all the time. What will happen? Because if they say that, oh, well, if you're gonna grow up under this bubble, the children's gonna blame the parents. They're gonna vilify the parents because they did not tell them early on that that's what they're gonna face. And opposition as a whole and opening government are on two extremes, whereas we as closing government, we provide the best on both sides. Hence, we care about our children, we care about the mental well-being, and we care about them being part of a change. Being part of a change. Yes, opposition. Oh, we make them be hopeful, we make them optimistic just so we can instill a change. The thing is how. What we provided is a how panels, is that we give a heart-to-heart talk with our children, and at the same time keep their hopes up and just strive them to be better. The opposition had made a really, really bad example about Asian minorities. When you look, if Asian minorities, all they gotta do is helicopter parenting the children and then letting them study till 12. Yeah, it's all right, thank you. I shall stop my speech right here.
All right. I thank the government whip for that very fine speech. Now calling on the opposition whip to close off this debate. Hear, hear.
Hi, can I check I'm both visible and audible?
Yes to both.
Where do I sit? I'm always afraid.
Panel, the reason why we tell young children that Santa is real is so that we give them hope and optimism. It's so that we tell them that there is still some form of joy and that there is still some mystique and magic in this wonderful celebration. It's so that when they wake up on Christmas Day, they wake up to hope to see the milk finish and the cookies finish, to hope to see the presents under the Christmas tree, and they're excited to keep opening the presents. That is the kind of world that opposition has constantly been striving for. But it seems to me that government wants to support a world where we tell children that Santa isn't real, where we tell children that the Tooth Fairy isn't real. Yes, it may even be delusional to say that Santa is real, but the most important impact in today's debate must be the mental health of children. And why? Because all all three other teams seem to be saying that this isn't true. They seem to think that financial success is the most important thing, and CG tries to add nuance. They try to say it is a balance between financial success and happiness. But what is the purpose of financial success in the eyes of parents? The purpose is ultimately to see your child happy, because both evolutionarily and as a society, we have decided that when we have children, our most important job isn't just to reproduce and continue the heritage line. The most important thing is your child's happiness and your child's mental health. As when a parent, you see your child depressed, that is the biggest harm and the biggest form of a stab to your heart that can ever come to a parent. And therefore, we think that the duty of parents must be to make sure that their child lives in a world which is, despite how hostile it is, make their children happy. Let's deal with OG. And I just want to point out how CG is completely derivative, as mentioned by my member, and CG didn't respond, so we were going to take it that they agree that derivative, they take a fourth. I'll take that POI first.
I hear that you keep repeating what I said, so I'll take it that you agree with my speech earlier.
Sorry, what do you mean repeating what you said? You can't respond to me right now, but I don't get what do you mean repeat what you said. Panel, I'm sure you're smart enough to tell that I'm not repeating what she said. Let's deal with what OG has said. OG said, and their main push is the idea that we are going to learn strategies to deal with problems because we are going to be more aware of the problems and therefore be able to learn strategies from them. And they said that it's easier to be optimistic upon success, and therefore through that method, you're not only going to get better mental health, you're also going to achieve financial success. And they also claim that the duty of parents is to achieve financial success. I've already rebutted that third point, but let's deal with how unsubstantiated all of these claims are. They talk about why optimism is likely to be passive and realism is likely to be more active. That if you're optimistic, you're unlikely to want to solve problems, but if you're pessimistic, you somehow know that the issue is there and therefore want to solve it. I don't fully get this mechanism, because just because you're optimistic doesn't mean you're delusional, nor does it mean that you don't understand the realities of this situation. I think O also points out very rightfully that if you're living in such oppression, clearly you're going to know that oppression exists. Clearly you're not going to know that, hey, this white guy gets more presents for his gift than I do. Why is this so unfair? Clearly, as children, we don't think they're so naive as to not even know that oppression exists, and we think that there must be a spectrum and this balance that we must achieve, correct? Because it's not like on our side we're going to give them complete delusion and tell them that the world is perfect with unicorns, nor in their world are we going to say that they have to show that the full realities of the world is completely harsh and like a ridiculously unfair world. Rather, we think that there is a balance that must be struck. So we think that we are going to largely mitigate all their harms by saying, you know that oppression exists, and another way we're going to mitigate this is through a model. Because at the end of the day, when this motion only calls for optimism and hope at a young age, what we're okay with doing as parents and what we think is inevitable is that while you're young, your child is likely to be within this bubble, but as they grow up, they start to learn more, learn more about the world around them, and therefore it is at that point where they truly understand the realities of the world. We are fine with that. There's also this unsubstantiated claim as to why you're going to be likely unaware of issues. I don't fully get why optimism leads to lack of awareness. Let's deal with what CG said, since it's largely the same. They talk about not wanting to antagonize the majority despite harsh realities, and being a minority literally meaning that the majority is antagonizing you. It is quite impossible to say that in South Africa apartheid, the white ruling elite isn't oppressing you, and try to frame it in a different way. I think that's literally impossible. Also, they talk about things like staying in the past in their member speech. They talk about being happy-go-lucky. That's literally impossible, because like that is supporting our side. We've told you why you're more likely to be happy through optimism, because optimism literally means that you are more happy. They also talk about ideas of being they also talk about ideas of trying to achieve a balance, which I've already rebutted earlier. Notice that in today's debate, what we must prioritize firstly and foremost is our mental health, and that's where I talk about our extension. Our extension, which remained largely completely untouched by GovWhip, which means that they completely concede that it's true, is twofold. Firstly, on the idea of mental health. We told you why the majority is likely to oppress the minority to a certain point where the majority of this minority group is unlikely to succeed. So as long as we show you that we benefit this majority of the minority, we clearly win. And if they're unlikely to succeed, what then is most important? What's most important is their mental health. We told you how hope and optimism shifts the goalpost of what makes success. We told you that as a parent, when you try to instill hope and optimism into your child, you will tell them that community is what success looks like. We tell you that being good at football as a Jamaican is what hope and success and looks like. That is what optimism looks like. When there's a POI, the random POI that says that hope and optimism isn't related, this is where I address that. We also talk about the ideas of how mental health is largely detrimental in things like, no thank you, childhood trauma and imposter syndrome. Because even if you do succeed, what are you going to do? Because now you are a pessimistic guy who has just managed to succeed, but then now you're going to tell everyone around you that minorities are oppressed and it's impossible to succeed. Even if in their best case, if you're able to succeed, we think that the pessimism deals with this. Second point regarding activism as to how humans have an innate nature to help other people who are also optimistic, help other people who are also willing to help themselves. There was absolutely no response. At the end of the day, we win over all three teams because why? We were the most realistic. All other teams were talking about financial success and being able to achieve this. We told you right from the start that because of political systems and the flaws in democracy, or even literally living in an authoritarian state where there is no democracy, means that it is impossible largely to achieve such success for a minority. At the end of the day, what's most important is their mental health. Let's also deal with OO and show you why we're not repetitive from OO. OO talked about a defeatist mindset, which they also repeated in DLO, and they talked about the impact being practical success. This impact is different from ours because we told you that our impact is on mental health and why children are likely to feel not just incredibly disappointed, but also really they just feel guilty and they feel terrible when they know about all of the harsh realities of life. We also told you and also know that OO lacked a counterfactual in this, in that while they explained why there is a defeatist mindset on Gulf side, they never truly explained why we have more inherently valuable happiness that only exists in Op side. At the end of the day, because life is cruel, we as parents need to tell our children only that at later points of their adult stage, because center is real.
I thank the opposition whip for that very fine speech. You may now cross the house. I will ask everyone to please leave the breakout room except for my panelist Melai. We will be calling you back once we have an OA. Thanks, everyone.
Excuse me, can opening opposition get a quick clarification?
Oh, sure.
Is time going to be enforced in this debate?
No.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone, you may please leave the breakout room so that Melai and I can discuss. And please don't join back until we call you. The team of closing government, could you please leave the breakout room? Charlene and Cress. Please leave the breakout room.